He is fresh off covering the Super Bowl champion Seahawks, but man, right back into the training camp and preseason mode. Gregg Bell, one of my favorites, always from my radio career, and now get to see your face. This is great. Hi, Gregg.
Hi, Amy. That's great to hear from you. And you are all Texas, the ads in Waco, and you are Southern Texas. You're in it.
I'm still getting adjusted, to be sure. I tell you what, I don't know how many years, if we live here, that I'll ever be adjusted to 109. I saw 109 degrees on the temperature gauge in my car over the weekend.
It was 79 in Seattle yesterday. Thank you.
All right. Can we accidentally cut him off? I think we have some technical difficulties.
Hey, Amy, it's great that you started by talking about Dolly Parton. What a legend she was. That's one of the favorite people in my wife's life. She told me for years about her and all she did, and the books, and the 320 million books donated to children. And I mean, she grew up dirt poor in East Tennessee. And now that she's passed, we learn even more about her, that the doctor who delivered Dolly Parton in 1946 was paid by her family with a bag of oats because they didn't have money to pay the doctor. She lived in a 2-room cabin that had no electricity and no running water. Then when she grew to this icon across the world, during COVID, she gave everybody in her hometown $1,000 a month for the entire year that COVID shut down Tennessee. And then the last month of that was $5,000. She spent $9 million on the people of her small hometown during COVID. There are people in the world, and then there's Dolly Parton.
You're right. And I was just telling the audience, too, that I feel like there's not one person who said a bad word about her. We don't agree on a lot in this country. We agree on the NFL, and we apparently agree on Dolly Parton. It's amazing because a lot of people who grow up really poor tend not to be as generous because they remember that, and so they keep everything they have, but not her. She gave away so much and impacted so many people. So I appreciate you sharing those. I had not heard that about her hometown during COVID, but the fact that it was sudden like this, I don't know if it makes it easier, but only 80 years old. Goodness, there was so much more that she could have done. But even now that she's passed, there's so much more that her legacy will mean to people as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Gregg. So as we talk about the Seahawks, I'm excited to talk about the roster, but I got to ask first, though, Hard Knocks being at training camp and part of the preseason, how much does that change? What is the typical routine on a daily basis?
It is different. And sometimes, Amy, I think they're performative for the cameras and the boom mics because they are everywhere. They're in the locker room. They're in the huddles during practice. They have robotic cameras in Mike Macdonald and John Schneider's office. John Schneider, the GM, Mike Macdonald, the coach. And we've seen those in the episodes. I mean, they even have the camera and the boom mics in the training room in the stadium in Nashville Sunday night when Bud Clark broke his ankle. And one thing to consider, my son, 23 years old, was a college soccer player and athlete. He's really into sports as well. He was watching it with me last night, and he said, "Why did they do that, Dad? Why do they have to have the cameras showing the FaceTime call with Bud Clark's fiance and toddler?" And I thought that was a little intrusive as well, but it tells a story and it's visual. One thing to consider is the Seahawks get a chance to view these episodes about 36 hours before they air. And they do have the right to cut out or say, "Nah, we just don't want this out there," or "This is a little too review." So it's not like the Seahawks didn't know or didn't approve everything you've seen in all 4 of these episodes. And that's true of every one of these. Of course, what makes this unique, this is the first time in 25 years Hard Knocks has covered a defending Super Bowl champion. Up until just a couple years ago, the league rule was if you made the playoffs, you were exempt from possibly being on Hard Knocks in training camp. They changed that rule a couple years ago. And in fact, next year, it'll be New England, the team that the Seahawks played in Super Bowl 60, that'll be on the Hard Knocks in 2027 for training camp. So I think it lends a different lens into an NFL team when it's doing one, not that's rebuilding or has a new coach or is trying to compete in the league after down years, but one that's at the top and trying to stay there. I think one other thing, Amy, it's shown, is I've known it from covering him for now 3 years every day. Mike Macdonald is an exquisite leader, and the leadership things that he does and the vulnerabilities that he should, he's a son of a West Point graduate. And as you can see, I proudly swear I was a West Point graduate as well. Something every day that I saw and heard and learned at West Point or in the Army Officer's Manual. Every day I see an example of leadership. And that's because it comes from Mike Macdonald's dad, a class of 71 West Point grad. But what I never learned at West Point, and I figured out once I became an active duty officer in the Army, was the empathy piece and the vulnerability piece. And for leadership to come full circle and have the effect that Mike Macdonald's obviously has had on the Seahawks, you need a leader who's vulnerable and empathetic. And I thought the scene last night of him talking about his mentor in O.J. Brigance from the Baltimore Ravens, who passed away after a fight of 19 years with ALS, really poignant scene of Mike. That was Mike Macdonald. And he's like that all the time with those guys. And he asked that they be just as vulnerable. Amy, they canceled team meetings and game weeks during the season and the playoffs and just say, instead of doing X's and O's of the game plan or working on the overfronts, we're going to talk about your why. Leonard Williams, tell us your why. Why did you come here? Why did you play football? How did you get here? And Leonard Williams stood up and said, what? Okay, we're preparing for the NFC title game. You want me to tell you why? And he taught him about how he was homeless for a time in Daytona Beach, Florida, at Maitland High School, and how a former Maitland High School coach in Florida had gotten a job at USC, and that is how he got a scholarship to USC. He became an All-American. He became a first-round pick, and now he's made $170 million in his career. That's Leonard Williams at the top. You go all the way down to the 53rd guy on the roster, and they take these walk and talks around the facility talking about their why. Hey, what was the highlight of your summer? Hey, what have you learned about being a father? And that's what they talk about. And that's the vulnerability, empathy piece that the Seahawks say is the reason they won the Super Bowl last year, because of their togetherness. It wasn't that they had the top-ranked defense in the NFL. It wasn't that Sam Darnold was clutch and Kenneth Walker ran wild in the playoffs. It was because of the togetherness that they think, the unique culture that Mike Macdonald's built. I think the world and the country on national television is starting to get a glimpse of that.
It's interesting that you say that, because so often we talk about chemistry, Gregg, and there's really no formula, no tried and true formula to get to chemistry, but often it does come back to relationships. It comes back to, and you would know this because, as you mentioned, you served in the military, you care more about the guy on your left and the guy on your right than you do about your own personal goals. And you are brothers with the men that you serve with, or the men in the locker room. And it sounds like Mike Macdonald's figured out a way to underscore relationship and caring about each other beyond what happens on the football field. Wow.
Yeah, it's one thing to do it in the military because the art of war, and that's a life or death situation, and you figure out really quickly if you can't depend on the guy next to you, it could be in your life. In the NFL, it's every man for himself, because the earning power can end in a play, as we saw in the Hard Knocks episode last night. This is a brutal sport with a short lifespan, the average lifespan of 3.2 years for any player. And so those guys always try to grab theirs when they can get it. And it is a very me, and it should be, because there are 27, 28-year-old guys whose NFL careers have ended. And yeah, they made a decent amount of money when they played, but then it stops. And they know that. That's a constant concern of theirs. I was a Major League Baseball beat writer for a few years before I became an NFL writer 20-some years ago. And the difference between Major League Baseball and NFL is night and day because of guaranteed contracts. And the relative lack of guaranteed contracts and guaranteed money in the NFL beyond the year you're in is overriding everything about an NFL player. And Mike Macdonald has broken through that and gotten out of the me and my contracts and built this togetherness in just 2 short seasons. That's his greatest accomplishment. It's not that he has the number 1 defense in the NFL. It's not how he's used Nick Emmanwori and Devin Witherspoon. It's not all his innovations on defense and vexing Kyle Shanahan, less so Sean McVay. But it is his culture he's established in a very what's in it for me environment of professional sport. It's, as someone who's been trained in leadership and knew, once I learned he was West Point's father was a West Point graduate, I knew some of it was coming. It's fascinating for me to see how he's employed it in the buy-in, how 100% the buy-in's been.
Although I have to say, one of my favorite clips from Hard Knocks so far is, and I don't remember which D lineman it was, when he kicked him out of practice because he wouldn't stop going closer to the quarterback.
Derek Hall.
Okay, so Derek he kind of bites back at him and drops a few choice words and what do you mean I'm supposed to be doing this and Mike drops, well, turns out I run this bleep in practice. So he also has that toughness,
Oh
and
yeah.
guys know that he is the leader. He's the one that sets the rules. So that was pretty impressive too. And I loved so there was another moment where the training staff or the athletic training staff had asked that they were holding out. You can't see me. I've got my arms out. They were doing the hammers, and they had to keep the hammers up in the air as long as they could in the meeting room. And the whole place is going crazy cheering for one versus the other. It was neat too to see that. So yeah, some of these clips, even if they feel more contrived, it's neat to go behind the scenes and kind of be a little part of what they're doing to get ready. And as you talk about their defense, world class, they did lose Bud Clark. So I know that was a tough moment for them, this rookie safety. How does this defense compare? How is it different than what they had in February when they were the world champs?
Well, the biggest differences that the first, their defensive line's older, of course. Now you've got a 34-year-old DeMarcus Lawrence and a 32-year-old Leonard Williams and a 32-year-old Jarran Reed. And history and precedent in NFL, you just don't play great forever. When does that cliff approach for their productivity in their career? I don't see evidence that it's there yet for those three players I just mentioned, but it's coming eventually. And the Seahawks are trying to exact another top flight year out of all three of those guys entering their mid-30s. The other thing is the third cornerback, Riq Woolen's departure is showing up every day here. He's now, of course, with the Philadelphia Eagles. They let him go. He signed a one-year, $12 million deal. The coaching staff would have liked to have Woolen back. The football operations side and John Schneider, the GM side, didn't think they had the money and the resources they wanted to throw at Woolen to keep him. But now they have a third cornerback situation. They don't like what they tried to start training camp with. Nehemiah Pritchett, an unproven middle-round draft pick from Auburn 3 years ago. Noah Igbenogany, a former starter with the Washington Commanders and a Miami Dolphins first-round pick, has gotten some time as a third corner. Why are we talking about the third cornerback well, in Mike Macdonald's scheme, that's a starter. Nobody ran in a league that is very sub-packaged. Nobody ran 5 and 6 defensive backs more than Mike Macdonald. Now, a large reason that is because of Nick Emmanwori and how great he was. But the fact they don't have a trusted third quarterback is why they've even gone into the Terrion Arnold Waters while he's facing 8 felonies in Florida. It's why they're signing Trevon Diggs, who nobody else wanted, and he's been on the street since January when the Packers cut him, and he hasn't had a full season. Diggs hasn't since 2022 with the Cowboys. Yeah, he's a former All-Pro, but he's had multiple knee injuries, serious ones, a concussion because a TV fell on his face in his house during last season. He's had all kinds of stuff, and that's why he was available. They're trying to ramp Diggs up to see if he can be the third corner with Devin Witherspoon and Josh Jobe. They chose Josh Jobe over Woolen. They kept Jobe on a 3-year deal with $8 million a year while letting Woolen go for $12 million in 1 year to the Eagles. But we'll see if that catches up with them as much as they use sub packages. The other noticeable thing, the most noticeable thing about the defense this summer compared to last season, Amy, Nick Emmanwori hasn't been in it. The arthroscopic surgery, ankle surgery last month from the Super Bowl week that he sprained his ankle. He is back in cleats running, but he's not practicing yet. He's not in Jersey. I'd say it's 50-50 that he plays in the opener. They're still expecting him to, but I also think they maybe expected him to be a little further along than it's 2 weeks now until they play the Patriots in week 1. But Nick Emmanwori is the everything to this defense. Macdonald does all he does in multiplicity and blitzing and coverage schemes and disguises largely because of Nick Emmanwori and how he employs him as a hybrid linebacker. They need him back. And every game they miss without him, they're far less of a defense than they were last season.
Feels like a good time to ask about the Seahawks and the NFC West. So the group as a whole, last year, the Niners were missing so many pieces and still ended up winning 12 games. And so it's a really competitive division, notwithstanding the Cardinals. We'll see what happens there with the new regime. But how do you feel like this division maybe has changed or the balance of power has shifted based on what we've seen this offseason?
Well, of course, everyone's annoyed at the Rams. All right, why are we even having a season? Because the Rams have already won the Super Bowl. That's happened. How many years have we seen that? Whoever wins the offseason wins the Super Bowl. That's not always what happens. There's a lot of things that happen between March and the following February. But no doubt the Rams addressed what their biggest needs were, and that's in defense and particularly the defensive secondary. Aaron Darnold seems to just be smart enough not to come in during August because the games start in September. So he'll sign and make that. That will be a formidable result. But I will tell you, Amy, that the Seahawks noticed in that Myles Garrett trade between the Rams and the Browns, Jared Verse leaving for Cleveland. They spent a lot of time the last couple of years, their offensive coaches game planning on how to handle Verse, and he was a problem for them. He often lived in the Seahawks backfield. And I'm not saying that they think it's going to be a picnic with Myles Garrett, but that's a big part of that trade that Rams lost that the Seahawks noticed. The 49ers, when they are healthy, they have proven they are a playoff team that can win the division. But the healthy part is George Kittle coming back. Now, there's doubt whether he'll be available week 1 or not. Is Fred Warner all the way back from a major injury? Trent Williams is going on 40 years old as their left tackle. Christian McCaffrey, the injury concerns for that team. I mean, injuries are the thing in the NFL. And as soon as you're injured, you're done with key positions. And that's what the 49ers have been beset by. I had a friend who was covering the 49ers a couple of weeks ago, went into their training camp, and 23 dudes couldn't practice in one day. You can say substation or whatever you want. The fact is, if they don't have the horses on the field, the Niners can't compete with the Rams and the Seahawks. I think if the 49ers stay healthy, it's a 3-team race. If they have any of those injuries catch up or stay with them, Seahawks, Rams, Christmas night in Week 18 should decide the NFC West, should decide again the top seed in the conference. Seattle's history is when they get a top seed in the playoffs, they go to the Super Bowl. It's only happened 3 times, and all 3 times they made the Super Bowl.
Greg, I remember you and I speaking before the Super Bowl. I believe it was a Sirius XM show. We were talking about the future of Kenneth Walker. And at the time, you were saying it's such a unique situation because he is going to be an unrestricted free agent. So he ends up, of course, not returning to Seattle and now with the Chiefs. And he had taken on more responsibility because of some other injuries in that backfield. But how does the offense look without Kenneth Walker in that backfield?
Yeah, you nailed it, Amy. The offense without Walker is the biggest question mark. A team that wants to run 50% of the time and lead the league in running and rush rate. They brought in Brian Fleury, the former tight ends coach from San Francisco, who has never called offensive plays in his career. He's a Shanahan disciple in the outside zone scheme, which is why they brought him in to be the Clint Kubiak extension from last year. But they don't have the lead running back anymore. The guy that they thought was going to be his replacement, the guy that they had a job share all of last season with Kenneth Walker, was Zach Charbonnet, and we saw him get hurt in the divisional playoffs. He's still not back. He's on the physically unable to perform list. He only had his reconstructive surgery in February. We all know that's usually an 8 to 12-month recovery, which would mean mid-October. He's going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list, which means he'll miss the first 4 weeks with games, and that'll be into October. So big questions, which is why they drafted Jadarian Price in the first round. Price himself has had leg issues during training camp. They've now put him under bubble wrap. He's not going to get a preseason snap. He's going to go straight to the opener. In fact, all 22 of the Seahawks starters on offense and defense will not play a snap this preseason and go straight to the opener without playing since the Super Bowl. They're relying a lot on Price. It's Price and a third-year former undrafted rookie George Halani, and then a potpourri of dudes behind him.
Wow.
They got Emmanuel Wilson from Green Bay, a 500-yard rusher last year. He's been out for the last 2 weeks with a hamstring issue. They like him as a short yardage back, but they're going to rely a lot on Price, Amy. Price was a backup at Notre Dame to Jeremiah Love, so he hasn't had a lot of third down reps and pass catching reps and all the things that most top first-round running backs would already have at a major college level. So it's a little bit of a dice roll. They like what they've seen with Price, how quick he is and decisive in the outside zone scheme. He's ramping up in the pass game. He's got to improve his pass catching and pass blocking especially. But, yeah, there's going to be a lot on Price for this offense to function as it's supposed to. They still have Smith and Jigba. They still have Kupp. They now re-signed Rashid Shaheed. Torrey Horton's been beset again by injuries. The first-round pick that should show much promise last year. A.J. Barner is going to be a breakout guy, I think, in this offense because he has now as a tight ends coach as his play caller. And I'm seeing Brian Fleury sending tight ends further down the field this preseason than we saw all last year under Kubiak. But if Price isn't what they think he is as a first-round pick, this offense is going to be different. I will say one more thing about the offense, Amy. people don't realize the Seahawks won the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold leading the league in turnovers last regular season. Now, he didn't turn the ball over at all in the playoffs, which is why they rolled on offense. But if he even cuts down his turnovers from, say, 20-some to, say, 15, how much more efficient this offense is going to be. That's his job, is to – not all those were his mistakes, but it is the ball in his hand. He can't turn it over like that.
I'm glad you brought up Jackson, though, JSN. I was going to ask you because he had a breakout year, a career year, really set the tone and set the standard for the rest of the wide receivers in the league. And obviously, it was Sam Darnold who was getting him the ball. So they had quite a connection. But where does he go from there after the season that was?
Well, only 7 dudes have had a season better than 1,793 yards, 120 catches, and all the touchdowns. So going up, I mean, if he goes up from there, he's reaching Jerry Rice type stuff. So it's unrealistic to think he's going to have 1,793 yards again, especially because Rashid Shaheed has a full offseason in this offense and a full offseason with Darnold. Remember, Shaheed came from the Saints in the trade in early November and just had to merge into traffic midstream. And Darnold wasn't used to his speed. He often underthrew him. We saw in the NFC Championship game, 2 minutes into the game, it would have been a 75-yard touchdown. But Darnold underthrew him for a 50-yard gain because Shaheed had to wait on it. They worked a lot in the offseason, Shaheed and Darnold together away from the Seahawks down in Southern California, training at Saddleback Junior College in Mission Viejo. They are much more in sync than they were last year. So I think that means Shaheed's going to get a lot more of the targets that JSN got some last year. And I mentioned the more use of the tight ends down the field. They're going to throw to A.J. Barner a lot. They're going to throw to Jadarian Price and the running backs a lot in this offense with Brian Fleury. Think San Francisco 49ers because that's what they're going to run. So they're not going to throw 70 times a game. So those targets that JSN got last year are going to go elsewhere this year, it would seem, based on what I've seen in training camp. That doesn't mean Smith and Jigba won't be a huge impact player and a number one priority to every defensive game plan when they play Seattle.
So before I let you go, it's still a surprise to a lot of people that Seattle is the team that ended up on top. And obviously, a lot of different factors and moments along the way. Seattle took advantage, the leadership, all the personnel we've talked about. But as you look back on last season, Gregg, what are a few moments that it kind of hits you? Wow, this team could really make some noise, or wow, this team actually has the potential to shock the world, if you will.
2. One was in November in Inglewood. Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions. He was throwing it right to Rams. I mean, just late. It was almost like it was a kid in the backyard that needed to get sent home and go home to mom because you're not even in this game. and yet it was 21-19 with a minute left. They're backed up on their own 1-yard line with one timeout, and Darnold drove them down the field in position for a game-winning field goal. It was 61 yards, and Jason Myers missed it by a yard or two short and wide. But on that drive and after that game, in the Seahawks locker room, the guys were talking about, whoa, this Sam Darnold dude's a dog. 4 interceptions, a career high, and he kept us within striking distance of almost winning that game. We should have been blown off the field. That was the game that Ernest Jones in the press conference, is now Seattle lore up here, said, anyone who has a problem with my quarterback, F you. And he said it live with the cameras rolling. And he said it when Sam Darnold was waiting in the wings right next to me in the press conference room. And when Ernest Jones left the press conference and Sam Darnold was coming in, Jones looked at him and said, I got you. We got you. And at that moment, I said, they got buy-in if they love a quarterback who just throw 4 picks against their chief rival. That was on offense. And then on defense, on week 18, in the night game at San Francisco, that was for all the marbles, for the division title, for the number 1 seed, the Seahawks absolutely throttled Shanahan's offense to the point that Mike Macdonald went for it on 4th and 3 or something from the 5-yard line on the first drive, which almost every coach in the league would kick a field goal. He went for it, and he didn't get it. But when he went for it in the first quarter on 4th and 3 from the 5, Amy, I said to myself, it's because he knows the 49ers can't drive the field 95 yards for a score. He knows his defense is so good in this game, they're not going to touch him. And in fact, the 49ers got 3 points that night. And that's a playoff team. They on the road, on their home field, they beat with 13-3, playing rope-a-dope with their defense. And that to me said, well, this is a complete team. A buy-in with the quarterback and the defense that can win games on the road with a division title and number 1 seed at stake. They played the Super Bowl in much the same way, just rope-a-doping on offense, don't turn it over, and let the defense throttle the Patriots, and that's exactly what happened. That, to me, is when I do this. Okay, they're going to win the Super Bowl. And for the Seahawks, 10 of those 11 starters are back on defense.
And that is kind of the mic drop for the Seahawks. As much as that division is really stacked and every season's different, they still do have the benefit of familiarity and understanding that this is the team, for the most part, that did win a Super Bowl. And so we should be able to start from a position of strength. We're dealing from a position of strength. I love it. So much fun. Well, it's great to see you, Gregg, because obviously you've been doing this for years.
At like 2 a.m. Eastern time, too. The sun's up. What's going on here? A.B. Lawrence with the sun up? I was like,
well, let me just tell you, it's taken some getting used to for me too. It's about 180 degrees from what I did for almost 20 years. However, if an old dog can learn new tricks like me, well, then there's hope. So it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much for a couple of minutes. And of course, we'll check in again sometime down the road.
Anytime. Enjoy, Texan, new transplanted Texan.
Right. My thanks to Gregg. He's so good. And as I tell him sometimes, every single occasion that we have him on shows, I learn from him. So I learned so much. I mean, we're talking about Dolly Parton to start, and he shares a story from her past that I had not heard. So it's amazing. And he's like an encyclopedia. Seriously, it's not like he's sitting there reading from notes. This guy is just, he is able to process everything he sees. And of course, his career now is entrenched with those Seahawks. So his perspectives, but also his observations and his knowledge are such great assets whenever we have him on the show. So that's awesome. Really kind of makes you think, though, about that Seahawks run game and the offense that they want to run and how they became champions a year ago. So much of what they did offensively was about running the ball, controlling the ball, because when you control the ball, you control the game. And that's very often what the Seahawks were able to do. And of course, it took some pressure off Sam Darnold as well. So some big time I don't know why I was about to spell it. Some big time question marks about the Seahawks out of the gate. But I mean, that's the name of the game, especially when you're a champion.